What if the one person who was supposed to love you the most became your worst enemy? This was the reality of Florence, a young girl born in the bustling city of Lagos. Her arrival into the world came with sorrow. Florence's mother died while giving birth to her, leaving her father, Francis, heartbroken and lost. He loved his wife dearly, and with her death, his world fell apart. Raising Florence alone was not easy, but he did his best. Florence became the center of his world. Even though her presence was a constant reminder of the painful loss he had suffered. 2 years after the death of his wife, Francis met a woman named Patricia. She was kind and caring at first, but as time went on, Patricia's true nature began to emerge. She was beautiful, and her two daughters, Amanda and Cynthia, were her pride and joy. However, there was one person she could never accept: Florence. To Patricia, Florence was a burden, a reminder of her husband's first love. Instead of treating Florence like a daughter, Patricia treated her like an outsider in her own home. As Florence grew, she noticed the difference in how she was treated compared to Amanda and Cynthia. While her stepsister wore the best clothes, Florence was left with old, worn-out clothes. Patricia forced her to do all the house chores, cooking, cleaning, and washing. She did everything with no complaint. But deep down, the pain of being neglected and unloved ate away at her. Her father, Francis, was too blinded by love for Patricia to see the truth. Every time Florence tried to express her feelings, Patricia would twist the situation and blame Florence. "She is ungrateful," Patricia would say. "You should be more like your sisters." Francis, trying to keep peace in the house, always sided with Patricia. "Stop complaining, Florence. You are lucky to have a stepmother who cares for you." But the truth was that no one cared for her, not really. Florence endured the torment in silence, clinging to the hope that one day things would get better. Florence's childhood was filled with hardship. Every morning, she woke up before dawn to complete her chores, ensuring the house was clean and breakfast was served. Patricia didn't allow her any time for fun or leisure. "Your place is here in the kitchen," Patricia would often remind her. Amanda and Cynthia were allowed to go out, play with friends, and attend school, while Florence was left behind, isolated from the world outside. At night, after all the chores was done, Florence would sit alone in her room, yearning for something more than the life she was living. She secretly borrowed books from the library and studied late into the night, trying to better herself. Florence dreamed of becoming a lawyer, a strong woman who could stand up for herself and others. But Patricia had different plans for her. She was a burden to her stepmother, someone to be hidden away and controlled. Her stepsisters, Amanda and Cynthia, often tease her. They call her Cinderella, mocking her and reminding her that she would never have the life they enjoyed. Florence longed for someone to care for her, but her hope seemed like a distant dream. Every day was a struggle, and every night was filled with silent tears. Yet, Florence never let the cruelty of her stepmother break her spirit. One day, while fetching water from the well, she met an elderly woman who saw the sadness in Florence's eyes. The old woman smiled gently and spoke words that would stay with Florence for the rest of her life. "Do not lose hope, my child. Life may be hard now, but the sun will always rise after the darkest night. Keep your heart strong and the world will open up to you." These words Though simple, filled Florence with a small spark of hope. She decided to hold on to this hope and keep fighting for a better future, no matter how difficult life seemed. Despite all the hardship, Florine had one thing that kept her going: determination. She secretly borrowed books from the library and studied at night, dreaming of a better future. She didn't let Patricia's cruelty stop her from learning. Florence was determined to become a lawyer one day, to stand up for herself and for others who were suffering like she was. She pored over books, trying to grasp the concepts of law, justice, and fairness. She believed that if she could become a lawyer, she would have the power to change her life and help those who were oppressed. But Patricia had other plans. She saw Florence as a burden, someone who would only hold her back. Patricia had two daughters of her own, Amanda and Cynthia, and she was determined to make sure they lived the life she had always dreamt of. She didn't want Florence to get an education. In fact, she often made cruel remarks about Florence's aspiration. "Education is for my daughters, not for you," Patricia would say, pushing Florence aside. "Your place is in the kitchen, not in the classroom." Despite the barriers, Florence's hope never wavered. She knew that education was her only chance to escape the life she was trapped in. She would study whenever she could, taking every opportunity to learn. But as much as she tried, her dreams seemed far out of reach. One day, as she was sitting by the window, gazing at the people outside who were living the life she longed for, a thought crossed her mind. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was a way out. Florine has always been a hard worker, and she knew she had something valuable to offer. But how could she make her dream come true when everyone around her was determined to crush them? That's when she met a kind stranger, a man named Daniel. He was a simple man living in the same neighborhood, struggling to make ends meet. Florence first met him when she was running an errand for her stepmother. Daniel was kind, always offering to help her with small tasks. Over time, they became friends. Florence found comfort in talking to him, something she couldn't do with her stepmother or father. Daniel listened to her, encouraged her, and showed her kindness in the world that had been harsh. One evening, as they sat together, Florence shared her dream of becoming a lawyer. Daniel looked at her with admiration. "You can do it," he said. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. You have the power within you to change your life." His word gave Florence a sense of hope she had felt in years. For the first time, she felt someone truly believed in her. As time went on, Patricia grew increasingly frustrated with Florence's refusal to accept her place in the household. Patricia had two daughters, Amanda and Cynthia, who were well taken care of. But Florence was a problem. She was strong-willed, intelligent, and determined. Patricia couldn't tolerate this. She needed to get rid of Florence before she became a threat to her daughter's future. One day, Patricia sat down with Francis, her husband. "Francis, it's time for Florence to get married," she said. "She's old enough now. Let's get rid of her before she becomes a bigger problem." Francis, who had always been too lenient with Patricia, agreed. He had no idea what Patricia had been doing to Florence, but he trusted her and believed that marrying Florence off would solve the problem. But who would marry her? He asked, unsure. Patricia quickly came up with a plan. "There is a poor carpenter in the neighborhood, Daniel. He had no money, but he is a good man. We can marry Florence to him. He won't be able to offer her anything, but at least she will be out of our house." Francis hesitated, but Patricia reassured him it's the best option. Florence will have a life of her own and we won't have to worry about her anymore. Francis agreed, though reluctantly. He didn't realize the magnitude of what he was agreeing to. Florence was being pushed into marriage she didn't want, with a man she barely knew. But Patricia had already made up her mind. The wedding was set to take place in a matter of weeks. Florence was devastated when she learned that her father had arranged for her to marry Daniel. She didn't love him and she didn't want to marry him. But her father, under Patricia's influence, didn't listen to her protest. He told her it was time for her to grow up and take on her responsibilities. On the day of the wedding, Florence felt like a prisoner. She had no choice but to go through with it. Patricia, Amanda and Cynthia were overjoyed at the prospect of getting rid of Florence. They made her wear an old dress, one that was too big and not fitting for a wedding. Florence's heart broke as she walked down the aisle. She didn't want to marry Daniel. She didn't want to marry anyone. But what choice did she have? When the ceremony was over, Daniel, who had been quiet and reserved throughout, took her hand gently. Florence looked up at him, unsure of what to expect. He smiled softly at her. "I will take care of you," he said. "You don't have to worry anymore." Despite his words, Florence couldn't help but feel trapped. She was now married to a man she didn't love, with no hope for a better future. But deep down, a small voice told her that maybe, just maybe, the marriage would lead to something more than she expected. Florence soon learned that Daniel was not the man he appeared to be. He was not poor. He was not a carpenter at all. In fact, Daniel was a billionaire. But he has chosen to live a modest life. He didn't want to be married for his money. He had seen how people treated him when they knew about his wealth, and he didn't want to marry a woman who would be interested in him only for his fortune. One day, Florence found a letter in Daniel's office. It was an official document, a reminder of a huge business deal he had signed. She was shocked. Daniel was a successful businessman, not a poor carpenter. The realization hit her like a wave. She turned to him with confusion and disbelief. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. Daniel looked at her with sincerity. "I wanted you to marry me for who I am, not for my money. I didn't want you to feel like you had married me for security or status." Florence felt a whirlwind of emotions, surprise, confusion, and a glimmer of hope. Maybe this marriage wasn't as hopeless as she thought. Maybe Daniel wasn't just a man she was forced to marry. He was someone who saw her for who she truly was, not a broken girl Patricia had made her feel. Florence sat in silence, her mind racing as the truth about Daniel came to light. How could someone so kind, so humble, be hiding such immense wealth? She had been wrong to assume the worst about him. Daniel was not the poor man she had been led to believe, but a billionaire who had chosen a life of simplicity. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Florence asked, her voice trembling. "Why keep the secret?" Daniel took a deep breath. He gazed steadily. "I didn't want to start our marriage with lies. I wanted you to love me for who I am, not because of what I have. I have seen how people treat others when they know about my wealth. I didn't want you to marry me because of it." Florence sat back, her mind still spinning. She had never imagined her life could take such a turn. She had been forced into marriage, but now it seems like it might be the best thing that ever happened to her. She wasn't sure how she felt about Daniel yet, but she knew one thing for sure. He was not like anyone she had ever known. Over the next few days, Florence tried to process everything. She had been forced into a life she didn't want, but now there was a chance for something better. Daniel treated her with kindness and respect, something her stepmother and father had never done. He was a man of integrity, and slowly, Florence began to see him in a different light. She started to realize that maybe this marriage could be the beginning of a new chapter in her life. But Patricia was still a threat. Florence couldn't forget the cruel way her stepmother had treated her all these years. She had pushed Florence into this marriage without care for her happiness. Florence knew she needed to find a way to stand up for herself and take control of her life, but she didn't know where to begin. On the other hand, Daniel was a good man, gentle, understanding and caring. She felt like a prisoner in her own life. She hadn't chosen this marriage, and even though Daniel had shown her nothing but kindness, she couldn't shake the feelings that her life had been completely out of control. One evening, as she sat in the living room, Daniel joined her after finishing some business calls. He could tell something was on her mind. "Florence, I know this is a lot to process," he said gently, "but I need you to know that you are not alone. Whatever happens, we will face it together." Florence looked at him, her heart full of conflicting emotions. "I don't know if I can trust this," she said. "I have been lied to my whole life by my stepmother, by my father. I feel like my life is not my own." Daniel reached out and took her hand. "I understand, but we can build something new together. You are not a prisoner here. You have a future, a voice, and you can do anything you set your mind to do. You don't have to be anyone's puppet anymore." For the first time, Florence felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this marriage wasn't as much of a trap as she had thought. Perhaps Daniel wasn't just her husband, but a partner who would help her regain the strength she has lost over the years. As the days passed, Florence began to open up to Daniel more. She shared her pain, her struggles, and the trauma of growing up with a cruel stepmother who had constantly belittled her. Daniel listened patiently, never interrupting, never judging. Florence had never experienced this level of understanding before. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Daniel said, "Florence, I know you have had a difficult life, but you don't have to carry that burden alone anymore. You have a chance to rewrite your story. Don't let your past define your future." His words struck a chord deep within her. For so long, she had felt like a victim trapped by her circumstances. But now, for the first time, she saw a path forward. A path where she wasn't defined by the cruelty of her past, but by the choices she made going forward. Florence knew she had to take control of her life. She had to stop living in the shadow of her stepmother's cruelty and her father's neglect. With Daniel's support, she realized she could start over. It wasn't going to be easy, but she was ready to fight for the future she had always dreamed of. Florence's newfound determination was put to the test when Patricia came to visit. She entered the house with her usual arrogance, as though she owned the place. "Florence," she said with a sneer, "how are you enjoying your little life with Daniel? I hope you realize that this marriage won't last. You will never fit in with him. He's too good for someone like you." Florence's heart raced, but this time she didn't back down. She stood tall, looking Patricia into the eyes. "You don't get to control my life anymore, Patricia. I am no longer the scared little girl you used to manipulate. I am a grown woman, and I am making my own decisions now." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Oh, You think you can defy me? You think you can escape the life I have built for you? You are nothing without me. I am everything with or without you, replied. Florence replied, her voice firm. I have learnt that my worth isn't defined by you or anyone else. I am more than your puppet. For the first time, Florence felt free. Patricia's words no longer had the power to hurt her. She was no longer the victim. She was the one in control now. Over the next few weeks, Florence and Daniel grew closer. With each passing day, Florence felt more empowered. She started taking steps towards her dream of becoming a lawyer. Daniel supported her every step of the way, enrolling her in a law program and encouraging her to follow her passion. Florence knew it wouldn't be easy, but with Daniel's love and her own determination, she was ready to face whatever challenges came her way. She had survived the cruelty of her past, and now she was ready to embrace the future she had always dreamed of, a future of possibility, strength, and hope. As Florence began her law program, she found herself immersed in the world she had always dreamed of. The legal textbooks, the case studies, and the challenging assignments filled her days. She had a burning desire for justice that fueled her determination to succeed. And she was no longer just surviving, she was thriving. Daniel, always by her side, continued to support her emotionally and financially, providing the stability she had never known before. He believed in her abilities and encouraged her to push herself forward, even when she doubted herself. Remember, Florence, you are capable of greatness, Daniel often told her. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. For the first time in her life, Florence felt like she truly had a purpose. She wasn't just a daughter to a neglected father or a wife to the man she didn't understand. She was Florence, a woman with her own dreams and ambitions. The weight of her past began to lift as she focused on her studies and the future she was building for herself. But her journey was not without its challenges. Florence still faced moments of self-doubt, especially when she was confronted by her stepmother's scornful comments. Patricia, who had once tried to control every aspect of her life, couldn't bear seeing Florence succeed. She still believed that Florence would never be able to rise above her circumstances. One day, Patricia confronted her again. You think you are something special now, don't you? She sneered, her voice dripping with venom. You have been living in a fantasy world, but you will never fit into that world. You will always be beneath people like Daniel. Florence stand tall, her heart racing but her mind steady. I am not here to fit into anyone's world, Patricia, she said with confidence. I am here to create my own. Patricia's eyes narrowed, but she still said nothing. She knew that Florence was no longer the meek, broken girl she had once been. Florence had found her strength and there was no going back now. Months passed and Florence's progress in her studies continued to impress her professors. She was excelling in every subject, driven by the knowledge that this was her chance to build a new life. She often stayed up late studying, poring over every details, every case and every law. It wasn't just about passing exams anymore. It was about proving to herself that she was capable of greatness. One day, as Florence was heading to the classroom, she received a phone call from Daniel. Florence, I have something important to tell you, he said. There is an opportunity for you at the prestigious law firm. It is your chance to get real-world experience, and I believe it could open many doors for you. Florence felt a rush of excitement. This was a moment she had been waiting for, a chance to prove herself in the legal world. "Daniel, this is amazing," she exclaimed. "Thank you so much for believing in me." Daniel smiled. "You've earned this, Florence. Now go and show them what you can do." The opportunity at the law firm was a turning point for Florence. It was her chance to make her mark in the world of law, and she threw herself into the internship with everything she had. She worked tirelessly, learning from the best and impressing her colleagues with her sharp mind and dedication. But as Florence thrived in her new environment, she began to realize that Patricia's cruelty wasn't the only obstacle she had to overcome. There were whispers behind her back, doubts about her ability to succeed, and a constant struggle to prove herself. Yet, every time someone doubted her, Florence grew stronger. Despite her success at the law firm, Florence couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Every time she went home, there was an underlying tension. Patricia's passive-aggressive comments, her sharp look. Florence could sense that her stepmother was growing more and more resentful of her success. One evening, after a long day at the firm, Florence returned home to find Patricia waiting for her. "You think you are so clever, don't you?" Patricia said, her voice filled with bitterness. "You think you are better than all of us, just because you have been given a few opportunities. But don't forget, Florence, you wouldn't be where you are without my help. I made you who you are." Florence felt a wave of anger rise within her, but she refused to let it control her. "I am where I am because of my hard work, not because of you," she said firmly. "You have never helped me. You have only tried to tear me down. But I am not that scared girl anymore. I am not your pawns." Patricia's face twisted with fury. "You will regret this, Florence. I will make sure of it. No one can ever rise above their place in this world." Florence stood her ground. "I have already risen above my past, Patricia, and nothing you say will change that." It was clear now that Patricia would stop at nothing to bring Florence down. But Florence was no longer afraid. She had come too far to let anyone, least of all her stepmother, hold her back. Florence's life began to take unexpected tone. As she grew more successful in her career, she began to re-establish relationships with people from her past. One afternoon, while working at the law firm, she bumped into someone from her childhood, her old school friend Mercy. "Florence," Mercy said, her eyes wide in disbelief. "Is that really you?" Florence smiled, recognizing her old friend instantly. "Mercy, it's been so long, I can't believe it's you." The two women embraced, catching up on the years they have been apart. Mercy was not working in finance and was impressed by Florence's career. "I always knew you had something special in you," Mercy said, "but I never imagined you would be working at one of the top firms in the city. You are amazing." Florence felt a sense of pride and joy hearing her friend's word. Mercy had always been kind to her, unlike many others in the past, and now Florence was finally where she belonged. As they chatted, Florence found herself wondering about her future. Could she truly leave behind the past, with all its pain and bitterness? Could she truly build a life of her own without the shadow of Patricia hanging over her? Only time would tell. But for the first time in a long time, Florence felt like she was on the right path. Florence's rise in the legal world did not come without its cost. The more successful she became, the more difficult it was to keep her personal life in balance. The demands of her career was overwhelming, and she found herself juggling her responsibility at the firm, her studies, and her strange relationship with Patricia. Daniel, the ever-supportive husband, noticed the toll her success was taking on her. "Florence, you have been working non-stop. You need to take care of yourself too. I don't want you to burn out. Florence was grateful for Daniel's concern, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being pulled in too many directions. She had come too far, but now she felt more isolated than ever. Her stepmother continued to undermine her at every turn, and her father only added to the stress by siding with Patricia. One evening, after a particularly difficult day at work, Florence sat with Daniel and poured out her heart. I felt like I am losing everything I have worked for, she confessed. I am so consumed by my career, but at the same time, I feel like the people I care about are slipping away. I don't know how to make it all work. Daniel took her hand gently. Florence, you are not alone in this. I am here for you. You have made it this far because of your strength, and you don't have to carry the burden alone. His words reminded her that, despite everything, she was not alone. With Daniel by her side, she could face whatever challenge lay ahead. The following weeks were filled with tension and uncertainty. Florence had become more withdrawn. Her once bright and determined spirit now burdened with the weight of her own ambition and her strained relationship with her family. She spent more time at work, immersing herself in cases that demanded her attention, but she knew deep down that she couldn't avoid the issues at home forever. One evening, as Florence returned home late from the office, she noticed something strange. Her father, Francis, was sitting alone in the living room, his face pale and drawn. There was a sadness in his eyes that Florence had never seen before. Dad, Florence asked, her voice gentle with concern. What's wrong? Francis looked up at her, a mixture of guilt and sorrow in his gaze. He hesitated for a moment before speaking. Florence, there is something I need to tell you. I should have told you a long time ago, but I didn't know how. Florence's heart began to race. What is it, Dad? What's going on? Francis took a deep breath, then spoke in a low voice. Patricia, she has been hiding something from you. For years now, I have been blind to it, but I can't ignore it anymore. Florence's mind spun with confusion. What are you talking about? What has she been hiding? Her father's voice faltered. When your mother died giving birth to you, Patricia, she wasn't as innocent as she let on. She manipulated me into marrying her, using my grief against me. But it wasn't just that. Florence, she had been controlling things from the shadows. She never wanted you to succeed. She was jealous of your potentials from the start. Florence felt as though the ground beneath her feet had been ripped away. She had suspected Patricia's cruelty for years, but to hear her father confirm it was a devastating blow. Why didn't you say something before? Florence's voice trembled with emotion. Why did you let her do this to me? Francis lowered his head, guilt written across his face. I was weak, Florence. I let her control me. I thought I was doing what was best for our family, but all I have done is stand by while you suffer. I am sorry. I am sorry, Florence. Florence's mind raced. The betrayal from her father stung more deeply than anything else. But there was something else inside her, something that refused to let this break her. This was her turning point. If her father wouldn't stand up for her, she would stand up for herself. I am not going to let her destroy me, Florence said. I have worked too hard to let her win. Francis looked at her with a mixture of admiration and regret. You are right, Florence. You are stronger than I ever was. I will support you no matter what. The next day, Florence went straight to Patricia. The time for passive acceptance was over. It was time to confront her stepmother, to demand the respect she had long been denied. Patricia was sitting in the living room when Florence entered, her usual smug expression plastered on her face. Oh, Look who's finally gracing us with her presence, Patricia said, her eyes narrowing. Florence gazed with cold and determined eyes. I know everything, Patricia, about how you have been manipulating things, how you have been trying to destroy my chance of happiness, and I am done with it. Patricia's expression looked dull for just a moment, but then she regained her composure. You think you can just come here and accuse me of things? You are nothing but an ungrateful little girl. Your father, I don't care about my father right now, Florence interrupted, her voice firm. I am done letting you control me. I have worked my whole life to get where I am, and I am not going to let you tear me down anymore. For a moment, there was silence in the room. Patricia looked at Florence, and for the first time, she saw a woman standing before her, someone who was no longer afraid. You have always been beneath me, Florence, Patricia hissed, her voice venom, and you will always be. Florence met her gaze without flinching. Not anymore. I am done being beneath you, and I am done with you trying to control my life. With these words, Florence turned and walked out of the room. She had finally taken back control of her life.